Hi, students. I am thrilled to have a friend joining me today from Indiana. And this friend and colleague is a little bit different because he actually is the internal audit, I'm going to say director, but he can correct me if that's wrong, but he is the internal auditor for a university. So this is the first time we've had somebody from our profession come speak about how he audits the university with where he works. So the person I have with me today is Chifundo, and I'm just going to say his first name. I already warned him. He's going to tell you his last name and tell you a little bit about himself. So Chifundo, I'm going to kick it over to you. Just tell us your background, where your education was, how you got into internal audit, and then give us a fun fact about yourself too.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me, Joe. My name's, I'm going to go with the first name, Chifundo. You got it right. My surname is Biliwita. Yeah, so my background, I'm not American. I moved here recently. I've traveled really so much part of the globe, like maybe 3 or 4 countries in my educational background. But my home country is Malawi in Africa. I did part of my education there, part of my education here in the US in Louisiana. I did my undergrad back home in Malawi, with a major in accounting. Then I did my MBA in South Africa, the University of Cape Town. And then later on, I did another MBA also online back in Africa. And then I did my certification. So the CIA, Certified Internal Auditors, CA Certified Information Systems Auditor certification, and then CFE, Certified for Examiner, and then SICA, which is a Certified Internal Control Auditor. In terms of the background on the work side of it, I have so far worked for about 15 years now. My current role here is the Director of Internal Audit and Advisory Services at Ball State University. For some of you that know Indiana, we are in Muncie, the little town 30 miles of Indianapolis. That's where we're based. Prior to that, I used to be the Director of Internal Audit at Eastern Illinois University in Illinois. But my work really in the higher ed has been like so brief, but before that, I've worked also in the health sector, public sector, and nonprofits. So cumulatively, I have about 15 years of experience in internal audit. In terms of fun fact, I think most people don't really understand why I got here. My primary dream to, what I wanted to be when I grew up was to be a truck driver. Funny enough, that's a story for another day, but surely, the passion that I had growing up was really in motorsport. I really wanted to be driving semi-trucks and all that, but I ended up in this profession. So, back in 2002, when I was finishing my high school, my parents believed that, the best person, the smartest people in the world are supposed to be doctors, accountants, lawyers, and all that. So they got me into a university to pursue medicine. I spent 2 weeks there, but I dropped out. I felt inside me that I was pushing myself to do something I didn't want, despite having the credentials, all the grades to make it, but I wasn't passionate about it. So I ended up having to enroll at the university in Malawi, the University of Malawi, to do my accounting course. This is something I did without any mentor, anybody else to talk me into, but I felt the drive to become an accountant. So I did all my, my courses and finished my first grad in accounting back in Malawi. Now back into the working sector, my first entry job post-graduating with a bachelor's degree was in finance and accounting. Just a year later, I found myself moving towards audit and investigations. So I shifted into public service with the Malawi Revenue Authority to become a tax audit and investigations officer. And this is where my passion for investigation and audit really, came into play. So since then, I've moved from the public sector to nonprofit, over the past 7-8 years to now higher ed. Briefly, I think that's what I can say, but you can say it hasn't been like a journey that I dreamed of to be an auditor today, but this is where I am now, and I love what I'm doing. I'm passionate about internal audit, mostly for 2 reasons. The first part is the value that we add to the organization, and 2, the personal challenge that it brings to me. I love to be challenged. I like to learn new concepts every day. I love to be able to unlearn and relearn new things all the time. So I'm so passionate about this. And the other key part that I found meaningful to life, really most of it is about when I see the recommendation that we make, one, they are implemented, and more importantly, they have been, or they help the organization that we serve achieve the intended purpose. So when I see an recommendation get implemented and making the meaning impact that I wanted, that's where I found meaning to and purpose in the job that I do every day.
Yeah, I love your passion, and that's one reason obviously I invited you to be on this interview for the students, because I think it's great for them to see people of all sorts of backgrounds, people who started in various locations and geographies in your case, and somebody that wanted to be a truck driver and switched to be an internal auditor. So I think it's a good point that you can start out almost anywhere and become an internal auditor just if you have that passion to learn and to grow and to continuously really improve your skills. So I appreciate you sharing your background with us. So you said you started in the public sector, now you're at the university. Can you give us insight into kind of one of the most interesting audits that you've done in your career? It doesn't have to be fancy, just anything that comes off the top of your head that you found interesting or intriguing.
Beautiful. Thanks for asking. Oh, I will tell you what, two things to this, right? So this is going to be a bit impactful, but at the same time, starting from a penny story, right? So when I just moved to in a nonprofit world, I was interested to look at our customer facing department. At that time, this is really, a department that was responsible to, scout and get new clients to get the product. Just for background context, without mentioning the brand, but the nonprofit was involved into providing loan services in terms of farm inputs and advisory and connecting farmers to access to the markets, after they make their harvest and the produce. So basically that was the context of the company. But then, their own customer onboarding process, had several spaces to it. We had a few team that would go out basically in the rural areas and communities, scout for clients. And during this process, they were using a triplicate copy, registration book. So one copy would be like, personal information and whether they are interested in the program and what products they would want and what quantities. And so the initial copy would go to the client itself at the point of registration. The second copy would go to the back office for the area people to do the data entry. And then the third copy was a record, a trail now in the book. Now, after doing this process, the second layer to it was we had the supply chain team. So this team would, prepare all the orders from the warehouses, load them on lorries and trucks, and get them out to the places where the clients were for pickups or deliveries. Now, at the time of the delivery, a client would then be called, they would print out a sheet from the system, from the ERP system after doing the data entry, right? And then they would ask each client to check against their name to confirm their credentials, confirm the products they ordered and the quantities. And then once they collect, they will sign on to confirm that, they'll sign off to confirm that they have received the quantity that they ordered. At this stage, a client will either, accept the products the way they are. They would be allowed to make the changes, whether, they would change from product A to product B, or the third part would be they would allow to change the quantities. If they ordered maybe 50 kgs, they would move to, 30 kgs, or they would get more, all that stuff, and sign off to confirm that they have collected the inputs. Now, after this stage, the next stage then would be, the finance, invoicing team now would go in and issue now the invoice and start collecting repayments from that loan. Now, this was something that we learned from the process conversation. Now, the suggestion I did make coming out during that process conversation was, I didn't see the value why they had to do a triplicate copy registration form. And because out at the end of the day, there was still another form that they would issue out, and only a sale was only happening at the point when delivery had happened and the client has confirmed what they have taken in terms of the quantity, their personal information, and the products and the value of those items. So you'd see here we had this manual, triplicate copy, costing, printing, and all that. But a sale was only happening at the time of delivery with the logistics team on the ground and the pickup, which was a different set of documentation. Now, I did make a recommendation to remove this first triplicate copy and say, can we cut off this book from this entire customer onboarding process? Instead, let's shift to two solutions. The first one was I did recommend that we go on tablet enrollment. So we send out our sales team to go there with, tablets, just register people really without having to make them sign anywhere. Okay, Chifundo is interested in customer in product A, B, C, D in these quantities. Amanda is interested in product C, on these quantities. Jeff is, interested in customer B on these quantities, that type of thing, but using a tablet enrollment process. The other one that I did recommend was to use a USSD process. So if a client had a phone at home, they would just go on a USSD and enroll themselves. In that way, we would cut out this entire paperwork that was being used just to register the client. And it was not used in terms of sale and even on, confirming the legalities of confirming that that was an order, because they will still be allowed to either drop out, opt in, amend their quantities of the products at the time of pickup. Now, during that time, it was a contentious issue back in 2017, and one of the county directors said to me that, that's not how we do things here. I know, you are being a dreamer because, you're coming from a profit, a private sector where efficiency is a must, but here the culture is we have to register them, keep this type of documentation, or before we will go on the supply chain and deliver the products. So this was dismissed by my county director then, all right? Now, 2 years later, COVID hit, so after COVID hit, now there was no way, there was going to be face-to-face personal contact with the clients, but we still needed to onboard new clients and get our products out there, because we're fighting hunger and all day. And so what did happen at that time was now, a shift to tech solutions. What should we do? The first thing that came out was, let's now adopt tablet technology to onboard the clients. Let's have USSD technology in there. So initially, while it was dismissed, eventually it ended up being adopted just because of the pandemic. But later on, reflecting backwards, we saved about $6 million US in 10 countries, which could have been avoided starting from 2018. But it only came in because it was forced by, COVID. So, I found this more of a penny point, but looking at the culture, how people say this is how we do things, and the fact that sometimes we might not get buy-in, but I still found value and purpose and really satisfaction seeing that it was adopted later on. And the good thing was, one of these directors came to me and actually apologized and said, I wish we had made this change back in 2018. So I found that meaningful. It's one of the audits that I, up to now, it still connects with me because of that change and how, the culture couldn't be changed, but eventually we ended up changing. And it was one of the biggest value changers in the organization.
I love that because it shows how, like a couple things. It shows how you were almost forward looking instead of just looking at backwards, right? Like not really just finding all the problems with what was wrong with the current process, but making the current process even better for the future. And I think that's a lot of what internal audit can do to add value that sometimes internal auditors forget. They get so stuck in just looking at how things already are that they don't think about how to improve it for the company in the future. And I think that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So looking forward to what can work at scale when things are not where maybe like now we're like maybe 15,000 students. Would this process work with 50,000 students, stuff like that? Yeah.
Well, let's talk about students. So let's talk about your university auditing now. What are some of the university audits that you've performed? And tell us a little bit about your department there at the university. What does it look like? How many audits do you do during the year? Give us a little bit of background about your current job.
Beautiful. So, I'm like 4 months in this new job. Previously, I was at Eastern Illinois University, like I said earlier on. But in terms of Ball State, we are a team of 5. So pretty much a leaner team, compared to the level of work that we do. In terms of the annual audit plan, currently we are scheduled to do about 12 audits in a year. However, we are dreamers. We are planning to expand that to about double the size next year. How we intend to do that, I think, there are several, tactics to that. The first one that we want to do is, deploy technology. So, instead of all the financials, most of them will try to implement data analytics, from both the predictive analysis, artificial intelligence, and also looking at, transactions that we can code and script to make sure we can be testing for things without having to go in manually to test for all the transactions. So that's going to increase the workload and the coverage that we do on that side. But then we're also expanding coverage to look at other things that are sort of non-financial, but very important, right? So things like, enrollment, of students, students retention, student success, staff engagement, or things to do with technology and all that kind of things. So these are the areas that we want to expand to, and why we want to go there is, it's not really more of a guesswork. We do appreciate, based on the risk, assessment, that much of what drives the university success in alignment with the mission really centers in what we do with the students. So what makes students to find our university attractive? What makes us distinct and unique on the market? What makes students to stay on campus? All right, and then looking at the fiscal resilience, which is now where we're looking at the financials and of course cost effectiveness. So we're trying to strike a better balance and making sure that we focus more on the things that really are sort of customer facing, in this case, students facing, right? If you do our work better with the students, the quality, the integrity of the program, the qualities, and everything that we do on the students, on the branding, it's gonna result into the good results on the financials, the fiscal resiliency, good repayment, good enrollment, good institution revenue, and all that. So that's like the end goal. Now, back at Eastern Illinois, I think one of the things that we did do, I think, the two audits that I remember very well, one of them was actually on staff engagement. So this one really was more to do with, like you said, the culture in the university is hard to change it. Sometimes we have very brilliant people, a lot more educated people, well experienced, they know their jobs. But because of that, we don't do so much, when it comes to documenting the policies and updating them, because people know they have the skill set to do their job on an everyday basis. Now, what I did see in our Eastern, what we led to us identifying this project was, there was sort of a challenge to fill gaps, which is really, I think, if you look at the industry, not just in higher ed, I think most organizations are struggling to hire new talent, right? So we had people that were retiring, leaving their jobs, and then we had, the ramifications of COVID coming in. People wouldn't want to stay in their jobs. Someone like, want to change careers and all that. So we had challenges with continuity in operations, loss in, institutional memory, how, effective performance of the day-to-day tasks, within the organization. So we saw that gap, and we said, okay, what's causing this? So, apart from seeing the market, we looked at, internally within the policies and the way we do things. That's why we discovered that we didn't have opportunities to cross-train, current staff and all that. We didn't have, opportunities to document proper train policies and keep them up to date, so that people, whilst if somebody leaves at the office, at least we can continue to operate, as a going concern, and also was following the standard practice. So when I started to work into this, I look at this project, one of the things that we did notice at that time was there was really, less desire for people to learn new things. And so that's what pointed us to the staff engagement part. So we looked at, we started now diving into that and understanding what are the key causes to this. Is it just the COVID? Is it just to do with maybe the changes in the environment now? How can we marry these two together to make sure that we are retaining staff, people have find meaning in the work that they do, and they are staying in their jobs for longer than, for the lack of a better word, if they can stay forever. That was really the end goal. So this is one of the projects that I did at Eastern, and I think it's one of the things that I'm so proud of the result, because at the end of the day, we end up having to inform the general strategic plan for the university. They just completed now a strategic plan, and one of the good pillars in there is actually staff engagement. So I'm glad, I think that's one of the key focus that came out from this audit. Another area I think that I also looked at, I think, was on ITS. So this was really a change management process. But everything IT, you can't protect what you do not know. So I think while the audit was focusing on the change management process, what we actually discovered was the university didn't have a proper inventory of what other technology, what assets we had in place. So I think eventually the audit led to the university going into a campus-wide process to just really register and document all type of IT assets we had, including Internet of Things. So I think that's another area that of an audit that we did. And it was really quite a game changer, considering, better. Universities, IT is never centralized, right? You have academics, people having their own IT things. You have facilities, doing their own IT things. And so it can get messy when it comes to IT asset management and how to make sure we're keeping the environment secure and everything follows the right process when it comes to change management. So these are the two audits that I can call out when it comes to the higher ed space when I was at Eastern Illinois.
I love that. We actually did an IT asset management project at my university last semester. The students did it. So I may have told you that already, but it was a really good eye-opening, I think, project for the university. So I definitely I agree with that one for sure. And now I'm intrigued on how maybe my students could do a staff engagement audit. So thank you for that idea, because I love that you have aligned what you're looking at with the big risks at the university, things like staff engagement and enrollment, and with the strategic plan. I mean, those are two very important things that I think make an internal audit department successful, is when we align our projects with what the university cares about ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my next questions, was how can we add value to our universities? And we may have answered that, but do you have any other kind of ideas on other ways internal audit can add value, especially at the university?
Yeah, I think the key part really, is appreciating that, not saying other industries don't have smart people, but, in a typical campus environment, most of the people that you work with, regardless that you're an auditor, people are super educated, they have experience, they are dreamers, they have all the ideas, and so there's a balance between being a dreamer and an optimist and somebody who is a bit conservative, like an auditor. So, one of the things that I think I definitely want to invest more time, and we are doing a lot about, is just really cultivating and maintaining relationships, right? If you want to add value, really let's walk in those spaces, where people are discussing strategy, participating there, knowing you want to listen, you want to know what they care about, all right? And so I think that's really the starting point. And then the next part is, again, ties to the strategy, making sure that a subject of risk and opportunities is not just about auditors. It should be part of the day-to-day operation of the business. So I think to that effect, I think one of the things that we are doing here is, apart from just going there as auditors, we're actually educating the campus on general concepts around governance, risk management and controls. So, on this risk management, I think one thing that I've seen, which is quite working right now, is that so many people, when they think about, let's do a risk and enterprise risk assessment, they think about this being, a check the box that should satisfy auditors, or maybe the compliance side of things. But now we are moving, saying, instead of talking about it as saying, let's do a enterprise risk assessment, we're switching the ways. Can we do a SWOT analysis of our own, missions, values, and goals? All right. So whatever project we're trying to invest in the upcoming year, we're actually asking the questions. Have you think of what would rock the boat? What would make this fail? Have you thought about what would make it succeed? All right. And so how do you make sure you stay on course to make it successful? Or how do you make sure that the thing that will rock the boat, you're actually paying attention to them, and you're gathering information and making sure that you are on track to achieve your objectives. This is really the whole concept of risk management, right? So this is something that is now being part of the conversation in most of the, the vice president, the president's office, and most of the C-suite people. Everyone is really asking questions around that. So now it's no longer an audit issue, it's now part of the day-to-day business. So this is in part not really an audit, but more of that outbound consulting activity that we have tried to educate the campus. So I feel like it's taking more time to educate the campus on what this is all about, what's our philosophy about internal audit is, not necessarily more of just waiting after the fact to catch things that are wrong, but we're taking, that sort of proactive approach to it and making sure we're helping them identify and prevent bad things from happening through area assessment and making sure they are tracking the right information to know, to know whether they are on track to achieve their main strategic goals versus not. So this is an area that I think we have added more value. The other area, which I think is super important, I come from a background of accounting, right? Most of our staff members here, they are also coming from that sort of background, business background, right? So you'll see that higher ed on its own, education is on. It's not our unique skill set, right? What that means is the thing that we value, most of them will be like on physical resilience. We want to make sure revenue is there, we want to make sure that we are a going concern. We want to make sure we are complying with the policies and anything that's regulatory or, from the legal environment. But that said, the key thing that drives the university are things that are not in this area, really. The main issues are on the student side, academic area, all right? What's the quality of education? What's the quality of, infrastructure that supports education delivery? What's the quality of students, students-faculty relationship? How do they feel secure? How do they feel, welcome on campus? How do they feel included? What are the things that keep them up here? Even in the world of commission where there are so many other universities. So we are taking 2 or 3 steps in there. The first one that we're doing is actually every month is targeted meetings. So we just go out on the faculty meetings and say, we want to learn, whenever you guys are discussing this, we want to listen and to learn what's going on. And then two, we actually starting conversation on, what data are we tracking on, what are the needs of the students? Do we really understand the needs of our students? Do we understand the thing that keep them here on the campus? All right, so making sure that on the faculty and academic side, academic side of the university, we are tracking data and looking at the trends and really listening in to what students care about. I did meet a student 3 weeks ago, towards the end of June. I asked the student, he's from a well-to-do family, up from the West Coast, actually. So one of the questions I asked him, why did he end up moving to Manson, Indiana? And he told me he actually visited several universities, but the first time he landed on campus, he saw, how serene the environment was, how the structure, what the campus was. You would see this is beyond the quality of the program, right? It's actually how the infrastructure is, and that's the type of thing that, often as an auditor, we don't think a lot more about what are the things that really attract students, what are the things that make them to be to stay on campus, to graduate from our university. So it's an area that we are, so intentional about. We are taking the time to really learn more about students, meeting them informal, not through an audit space, be it students union members, be it, sorority groups members, just to understand what are the things that they find attractive on campus, and, partnering with the students' life or the student affairs division to make sure that we are promoting the needs of the students. If the students are happy, they're going to stay here. If they stay here, they're going to repay, they're going to enroll and repay and pay as the tuition, and we'll be fiscally resilient, so that's what we're looking for. Back to your book of, audit should not be, quality should not be audited in, right? We're looking at making sure that side is part of the business before we start looking at the numbers and the controls.
Yeah, I love that you kind of plugged my book there. So thank you for that. Yeah. But, I'm all about how we can, number one, reach our customers. And I love that you have truly identified that the students are your ultimate customer at the university. And I think a lot of university auditors, they go through their day-to-day looking at departments like IT or admissions or transfer services, and they forget that the customer of all of those departments is the student. And so I love that you've really connected to that end user and even interviewed students. That's great. And the other thing I just want to point out is that what I see you or hear you saying is that you are getting to audit kind of the softer stuff at the university. Yes. And people forget how important that soft stuff is because it's harder to audit. The atmosphere and the environment and the culture and the ethics and things like that, they're not as easy to audit as, is this number correct? And so you are getting to the harder stuff, but it has the greater impact. And I love that about your work. So I appreciate
and I think the other key part I would just want to add, as you're speaking through that, really, is to go in that audit knowing that you're going to wonder about, you don't know it all, and you should be able to ask questions, right? Typically people know us as auditors coming in with procedures documented. We just want to check the box and confirm it's being followed. This is an environment which is strategic, right? No strategy is wrong, no strategy is right. So we should be able to be consultative, collaborative with the process that we're auditing, and really reason together and reach out, what's the end goal? What's the biggest driver to our success? When we align on that, it makes it easier for them to know we are part of their success. We care a lot about the things that they want to achieve. And it makes it easier to audit even without the policies and procedures in these type of strategic areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Not everything has a policy and a procedure and is a compliance type audit that we could just check the box, right? So it takes a lot of outside creativity and thinking and strategy. So I have one last question for you, and then we won't take up any more of your time. But if you could give advice to students today, this could be on a personal level or a professional level, what would you say to students today? What piece of advice would you give them?
So it depends if they want to be in audit, right? My always question is, take yourself a paper and ask yourself this question, do you have desire to learn new context, new information every day? Yeah. Do you have desire to go in situations, no preconceptions, where you're just going there openly, effectively listening to someone without judging them from what you heard somewhere else, without judging them from what you read in your book or what your professor told you? Are you somebody who is passionate about staying, high integrity, following high ethical standards? Are you somebody who truly cares about change and who is open to being challenged, right? Because every time you're making the proposal to make a change, someone might say, no, I have a different view. Are you somebody who is open to contrasting, constructing, or dissenting views? Are you somebody who takes a no with grace and really just take time to listen to people? If your answer is yes to that, internal audit is the way you need to be, So my advice to anyone who wants to pursue a path in internal audit should be, a combination of these factors: the desire to learn something new, the desire to go into situations not knowing you know the right things, but you are able to ask the right questions. You are listening attentively and actively, and you are also giving people an opportunity to explain themselves out on things, because not so many things that are wrong in this area really are coming from an ethical, point of view, or maybe people had ill intentions. I still remember very well, one of my professors when I was doing my ABA asked me this question. Chifundo, as an auditor, and if you go to a university today, let's say the university where you are today, Joe, maybe it might have been there for the past 50 years or 40 years or 100 years, right? If this university is still there today, it means most of the things that are happening there are right. They're not wrong. All right. So you're not going to come there as an auditor thinking you know it all. So the ability to be able to learn and appreciate that so many things are going on well and tapping into that aspect of saying, can we now improve, is what I think that the biggest advice I can give to any student who wants to pursue a career in audit.
I love that. Well, I am going to leave the students with that note, because I think those are just some great pieces of advice. And really, when I think about it, they're great for audit, but they're probably great for any career. We want to continuously learn. You want to step up and have that ethics and integrity to challenge things, to ask questions, to improve your processes. So I think that applies to anybody. So Chifundo, thank you so much for taking the time to be with the students and do this interview. And I just really appreciate you being in my network and knowing you. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.